let me take a moment to introduce Marie Melone. I've known her for about 5 years now, which just seems a very short time, and yet she was one of the people that when I first entered into the arena, the octagon of dental practice management groups and all of that, supported me directly. And I just so appreciate what you did for speaking at our summits and the work that we've done together. I referred her a bunch of clients. Let me say, Marie is the most competent and capable person that I'm familiar with in terms of acquisitions and in terms of appraisals. And she does just a magic job for the clients. So Marie, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your background, and then we'll jump into it.
Sure. Thanks, Mark, for that warm introduction. When you say we've known each other for 5 years, sometimes it does feel like it's been much, much longer than that. So it's been great to work together and see the Summit series grow and develop and continue to help and support emerging group practices. So I'm very happy to be here with you today, and hopefully we'll be able to share some good information for your audience. In terms of my background, I started out as a CPA working for KPMG in their Boston office. Most of my clients were in the healthcare life science field, and one of those clients happened to be a company called American Dental Partners. So I got to know the dental industry and know them through our quarterly and annual audits, as well as performing due diligence on most of the acquisitions that they performed. And then they offered me a position in what was called corporate development, and I did that for about 10 years. Was involved in about 100 transactions ranging in size from a $50,000 patient records acquisition to a $90 million multi-group, multidisciplinary group practice acquisition. And then 5 years ago, I left that company to start my own firm, offering buy-side and sell-side representation to solo dentists as well as group practices all over the country.
So a lot of my clients start getting contacted by PE firms. And they don't know what to do when this contact comes in. What should their next steps be?
Yeah, I mean, we are definitely seeing this quite regularly. I think anybody that has probably at least 2 or 3 locations is being contacted either by a growing group practice that's backed by private equity or a private equity firm directly. And I think that, or what I often see is, because there are so many seminars and conferences supporting emerging group practices, the ability for those groups and private equity firms to reach out and contact is becoming a lot easier. And I think in the same vein, those groups also feel comfortable responding directly because they've gotten some knowledge through attending these various seminars. So the mistake I see is that I think it's very easy for a prospective buyer to say to a group, well, just show me your last 3 years of financials, and we'll be able to give you a sense of where we see the value of your practice. And while it's easy to do that, it also doesn't always tell the best story about that group. So looking just at a historical perspective isn't necessarily going to provide the prospective investor all the details and information on what the real opportunity is for partnering with that particular group. So that's the first, I think, mistake I see. The second mistake, I think, is just generally making sure that you do have the proper advisors. Most people that grow a dental group have only done it once. It's not, you don't often see people that have grown a group, sold it, they're growing a second group. And so if you've never gone through a process to either partner with a private equity firm or a strategic group, whether it's a partial or full transition, you've never been through it, There are a lot of things that I think can get missed. And what I often see is groups focus on one thing, the price, either the price or the multiple. People seem to get caught up in one or the other. And if you have never been through a transaction like this, what you are missing out on are the fact that to consummate a transaction at that level, there's many, many other elements to the deal that some of which can have some very significant economic consequences. And so by just focusing on that one element, price, you oftentimes are losing out on an opportunity when you have the most leverage, which is upfront, to negotiate more favorable terms in some of the other areas of transaction.
So what do you find after the deal closes? What are the issues that come up for these dentists?
Well, I think, you've kind of hit the nail right on the head. I do think that many times people only focus again on that price. What's the money that's going to end up in their pocket, as opposed to understanding what's the relationship going to be like post-closing. And that can either be a short-term or a long-term commitment that's being made. And there are any number of things that are important to consider. Again, some of them have economic consequences or not. If you're in a situation where you're not going to completely cash out and you're going to roll your equity into this new partnership or relationship, if you don't have an understanding of what the goals of that larger organization are, or how you may or may not be able to impact the results of that organization, you could be putting that equity investment at significant risk.
Well said. You always say it better than I do. Given my emerging and small groups as I take them to the larger size, what do you see are their challenges coming into the future?
I think there's two big challenges for emerging groups. One is on the growth side, whether it's de novo or acquisition. More so on the acquisition side, obviously, because with de novo, it's really just finding the right location. But on the acquisition side, if you're an emerging group practice, you have some very stiff competition. The larger, whether they're a regional group or national groups, they typically have dedicated people, similar to what I did for American Dental Partners, that are 100% focused on finding the next deal, finding the next transaction. And so if you're an emerging group, you probably don't have that depth of management team built out where you've got somebody solely focused on looking for your next acquisition. So that's the first level of that competition. The second level of that competition is because, there are people that are exclusively focused on this. They're often getting acquisitions prior to them even coming to market. So again, a lot of these private equity firms or private equity backed larger group practices, they're going direct to doctors and trying to convince them to sell directly, not using a broker, not going to market. And so it's hard to compete against that when you don't know something is available for sale or somebody's making a potential offer on it.
Absolutely.
And then, the third element of that sort of competitive nature is just the access to capital. Again, emerging groups, we know are having challenges getting enough of a line to be able to be very proactive instead of being reactive. Whereas the larger groups have, I would say readily, easily access to capital. And then the last thing I think that is facing most of the emerging groups is on the doctor side, because that's, the biggest driver of their revenue. And so again, the challenge is the larger groups, they have presences at the dental schools. They're getting direct contact with, candidates coming out of whether it's school or residency programs or specialty programs. And they've also got, marketing teams that are putting together, very nice portfolios and brochures that tell a really nice story about what it means to come work for that particular dental group. And so again, as an emerging group, generally your resources are somewhat limited. And so to do all these things takes time and effort and to some degree capital.
I'm so thrilled that you'll be speaking at the 2018 summit, and you're just, for me, you're the top of the game.
Well,
so I really appreciate you being on this call. I appreciate you doing this interview, and we'll speak in the future. So thank you a lot, Maria. Be well.
All right. Take care.
You too.